All right, welcome in Carps Corner, back here and ready to go. Sorry, took a couple days off, got a little R&R, much needed. Took time for a wife's birthday, went down to Turks and Caicos, enjoyed some sun. So I just wanted to kind of fully detach. And I'll tell you, folks, it was beautiful. As much as I love covering sports and love being tied in and plugged in, like all of those things are absolutely tremendous. It is really nice to not turn the television on for a couple days, to set your phone down, not to feel the phantom buzzing and all this stuff happens, and just kind of unplug. Now, in doing that, was I drinking? Probably starting the party, maybe 10:30, maybe 9:30 with some late breakfast on occasion, get a little workout here and there, get a little jog, do some of that. But it was really nice to not feel it. Just sit back, read, enjoy the waves, spend time with friends, and try to reset your batteries. Not fully as much as I would have liked, but you get back, you're thrown back into reality. Want to take a day or two to get back into that before I connected here as well. So want to start off a little bit. We got Deshaun Watson. What's going on with him? The NCAA got some remarkable numbers that were tweeted out by Steve Berkowitz. Put a lot of information out there about where the NCAA has been spending their money over the last year. Some awesome news for NFL primetime. It's a little sad state for Tariq Cohen, what went on with him, why NFL players are choosing to retire now. I think this is a unique situation, unique time where you're starting to see some athletes take a look at life, and then also understanding expectations in life and where you're at. And with that as well, because that's going to apply to the Cincinnati Bengals. I wanted to dive into this. And I don't talk a lot of NBA or college hoops, but I love basketball growing up. And former Gonzaga star Dan Dickau has a pretty interesting evaluation of kind of how we develop stars in the United States. And a lot of people push back on this, but I do think there is some stuff at the core here. Again, Deshaun Watson, first of all, going to meet finally with the NFL. He's in the middle of a lot of his civil trials right now, in his civil cases, to see where those are ultimately going. I think when he meets with the NFL and Lisa Friel, who's their lead investigator, special prosecutor out of the state of New York, she's highly qualified to try to get to the bottom of this stuff. I think the NFL is going to ultimately want Deshaun Watson to try to settle these cases. The problem is the precedent has been set is when guys settle civil cases, there's always the assumption then of guilt. You didn't want it to get to court. You didn't want to fully defend yourself. When in reality, anybody who's been sued understands sometimes it's cheaper to settle than it is to even press your advantage and ultimately clear your name because of the legal expenses and everything that's going on. But I give a ton of credit to Deshaun Watson. Came out and said that he is going to fight all of these to the very end, and that's his right in America. But I don't think the NFL likes it, because the NFL doesn't like negative publicity. They'd rather all to come out, news dump it. Hey, here's what happens. He's suspended 8 weeks, 5 games later, whatever the number is. He comes back, and then it's kind of over with. But you have little silos of when news comes out. They don't like the fact that this is a constant bleed that I'm talking about it. ESPN, that Fox, everyone, all their partners are talking about it. They don't want that to be the case. But the reality is Deshaun Watson came out and said he was going to fight all these. So he doesn't care about the slow flow of information. And if they were not able to bring charges criminally, and if none of the civil cases land and he's not found responsible in any of those, which has a much, much lower threshold for the standard of, we'll call it guilt, the preponderance of evidence, if you will, it's just over 50%, 51%. And if they can't get there on those, I'm not sure how the NFL is going to sit here with all these cases and say he did anything that violated the personal conduct policy. Yeah, it's bad PR, and there's a lot of bad stuff with it. And there's a lot of unseedy things and stuff that, we may cringe when we hear and you hear talked about. And I'm not here to say whether he did or didn't do it. That's not my objective in this. My objective is to look at it and say, what does the NFL want? I think the NFL ultimately wants Deshaun Watson to settle so they can tie a bow on this thing, issue their suspension, their findings, and move forward. What does Deshaun Watson want? He wants to clear his name. He doesn't want this to be lingering and be attached to him anymore. And I respect that for Deshaun Watson. That's the right in America. If he wants to spend a ton of money trying to clear his name, then dude, go for it. That's your right. You have the ability to do that. Browns, they probably just want to have some certainty of, hey, if you're going to fight this all year. They've talked about these cases taking the entirety of the 2022 season. So likely there wouldn't be anything that would potentially happen this year. And so with that, it's like, all right, then you'd be punting into 2020 or 2023 should something occur and should they need to make a move. So it's real hairy for the NFL and Deshaun Watson. One other interesting element that needs to be discussed as well is when you start talking about the NFL, you have to bring up their partners, not the players, their ad partners, and now television partners, and now their gambling partners. So ad partners, listen, there's people that probably get squeamish when you start talking about Deshaun Watson, everything that's going on with him, and they may not necessarily love everything that he represents and how the NFL is handling all that. TV partners, they got to figure out how they're going to schedule games. Browns have one of the top flight quarterbacks. They traded for Amari Cooper. They, last year took a step back, but 2 years ago were really good. And like it or not, people enjoy watching the Cleveland Browns. They have a passionate fan base and people tune in. All those things are true and they're very important. So if teams can flex them and put them into windows that are highly viewable and highly visible, you've got one of the best young quarterbacks in the NFL and a team that 2 years ago was really good with a franchise that has a great long history, but still has been a lightning rod in recent history. So people care. They tune in to watch. And the last prong of this is the gambling partners. So we got to sit out there, whether it's DraftKings, FanDuel, Vegas Insider, you pick them, MGM, all of them, Caesars Book. They want to sit there and they want to know, can we set lines on some of these games? But really more so the futures, over under win totals, odds on winning the division, all of those things come into play, making the playoffs. They have a hard time setting lines when they don't know how much the starting quarterback is going to miss. How many games will we have to sit out? And so they want to make money. They don't want to set a line that's inaccurate. And some sports books have those lines out already. You can go bet on them. And I think looking at it right now, there's the assumption that he's going to play all 17 games or miss very, very few. And that's based upon that Browns have a great chance to win the division and their odds are very tightly clustered with the Ravens and Bengals. If he's going to miss 8 games, I think those things drop dramatically. But casinos don't like to get beat. And they like to have all the information. And so the last thing they want to have happen is for people to start making large bets either way when they maybe have more information than the casinos on what is going to potentially happen. So the NFL wants a resolution for this. They want to get this thing resolved. They want to get it fixed. I don't think it's going to. I think Deshaun Watson is going to take this thing to the bitter end. Listening to what I've been hearing, I don't know if he can win them all, but I think he's got a fairly decent case, and I don't believe his attorneys would probably, and I don't know if they're advising against this, but you think someone would get into his ear and strong arm him a little bit if this didn't look good and he didn't have a decent shot at being able to sweep the deck, because that's what you've got to do. You got to run the table. So we'll see ultimately where that goes. Some college news. NCAA news. Steve Berkowitz had this tweeted out, and this is unbelievable when you sit here and look at it. The federal tax records for the NCAA. It's a nonprofit, so it's all out there. And we've kind of hinted at this and talked about it a little bit of where some of the dollars go. Where does the money go for the NCAA? And in 2021, over $52 million went to outside legal counsel. Now, a lot of it was for the Alston case, which was, ended up being a Supreme Court case, and legal costs over that for a couple of years and everything that went into it. And those things are very, very expensive to defend, and everybody understands that. But almost $53 million for outside counsel. Then you look at 2020, think that number's going up or down. 2 years prior, $70 million to outside counsel to help defend different litigation and to go attack. A 7-year total, since the 2022 returns aren't going to be in yet. So you've got 21, you've got 20, you've got 19, you've got 18, 17, 16, 15. A 7-year total for litigation outside counsel, $304 million. It's over $40 million a year on average. Now, obviously, 1 year's ballooned up there around 70, but probably their lowest years in the 30s then, high 20s, 30s. It's a heck of a lot of money to be spending when you could be finding ways to better allocate that to, let's say, the women's basketball tournament gym. Could have done that. Could do a lot of things with that money, but instead you're going to spend it on legal fees. And this is my problem with bureaucracies. And I don't care if it's the NCAA. I don't care if it's your state association. In Ohio, it's the OHSA. They find an unbelievable way to just to waste money. They are not good stewards of the dollar because it's not their dollar. They're getting paid. And so it's incredibly unfortunate that this happens and that players work hard, all this money pours into the ad coffers, and then this is ultimately how it's wasted. Terrible stuff. But back to some good news. Let's get to the good news. Many years ago, they decided to flex the Sunday night football games. And they had so many built in that were locked in, and they started flexing them at the end of the year. And then they opened up even more to being flexed for Sunday night football with NBC. That was terrific. And you could do that because all the teams were playing on Sunday. And so no one was staying another night. You don't stay over an extra night in the NFL. You fly out right after the game. Well, Monday night has always been tough. You get some rough matchups. Injuries happen, the teams underperform, and it just isn't that compelling matchup for you to get down and sit on the couch on a Monday night and lock in and be able to watch it. And now they're going to flex Monday Night Football for weeks 14 through 18. That's a huge win, folks. The flexing of Monday Night Football games from weeks 14 to 18 by ESPN and the NFL allowing them to do that is a game changer. We're going to get great matchups now towards the end of the season. And make no mistake about it, I think that there's a lot of them being able to do that at ESPN with the addition of Troy Aikman and Joe Buck. I think that that matters, but it's a win for the people. It's a win for the folks. And here's one other thing we're going to get: 3 Monday Night Football doubleheaders. Now, we fell in love with the random Tuesday game, that was kicked out. Occasionally, there were games all over the week during COVID, and it was glorious. I like that. I like them sprinkled in. I know it's not feasible. I understand from a player and a coach, it's awful shortening 1 week, lengthening the next, especially when you're on a routine and you didn't know what was going to happen until later. I don't think they're going to go to some Tuesdays and random Fridays and all that stuff, or Wednesday night games. I like NFL football, and as much as you can get it, I think that's great. Kudos to the ESPN and the NFL getting that done and allowing that to happen. Now, some tough news here. Tariq Cohen, former Chicago Bears running back, current free agent, missed part of 2020, blew out his knee, missed all of 2021, still rehabbing that thing. And this is the highs and lows, folks, of social media. I believe his Instagram streaming live, videoing his comeback, him working out. He's in great shape, and pops his Achilles. Not gonna be done for this season. Hopefully he can get back for next year. I mean, that timeline would be tight, but you think he'd be able to. But here's the reality. I mean, he's going to be a 28-year-old running back at the start of the 2023 season. He's 5'6". He hasn't really played much in 2 years. And as a guy who I love to watch, he had overcome so many obstacles and overcome the odds. It looks like this is probably it for him. Maybe he surprised us and is able to go back out and get it. But so many people saw this because it was being streamed live as it happened. Injuries are part of the game, but when you're not actually playing the game and you're training, that's what makes it really tough. And that's what makes it hard. And so that's why it's a segue into this next conversation. When we have guys now, we have players in the NFL who have started retiring earlier than ever. And when they still have meat on the bone. Now, Tom Brady returned, but his guard, Ali Marpet, stepping away. And you wonder why. Like, why does this happen? The guy's been successful in his career. He's played 7 years. But he told The Guardian, hey, I love playing football. We'll throw this up here. I love playing football. But one of my strongest values is health. And if I'm really going to live out what's important to me, it doesn't make any sense for me to keep playing. There are also the unknowns of head trauma in the NFL and how that plays out. Plus your joints, the aches, the pains that come with surgeries and all that stuff. To me, that's the bigger issue. The head trauma, that's hit and miss, man. That's rolling a dice. That's like smoking cigarettes. Some people are fine with it. Some people aren't. It's different. Everybody's going to respond differently. But the joints, the surgeries, the fact that Marpet was 300 pounds and he talked about that, of how much he had to eat and just weigh and what that did ultimately to your body. And I think you're going to start to see this more and more, where guys, despite all of the medical advances, look around. It's like, hey, I've made over $30 million in my career, won a Super Bowl. What else is there for me to do? What else is there for me to achieve? You've got guys like Tom Brady who are wired differently, and he plays the position of quarterback. He didn't get beat up the same way. You know, you look at someone playing offensive line, that's a tough, grueling position. As someone who played 7 years, like, man, I have massive respect for guys that play 8, 9, and 10, and the dudes that hit 13, 14. I mean, there's something special about them. They are unique beasts, and it's very, very impressive that they can do that. And so you see Marpet step away. It's like, all right, bud, I get it. I understand why you're calling it quits. And this isn't the old Derrick Rose, hey, I want to be able to barbecue with my kids. Like, I want to be able to walk down the stairs. It hurt me walking down the stairs the other day. It just weighs on you. It hurts you. It does not always feel good. Some positive news when it comes to expectations and understanding when they begin to change on you. I think that's a big thing. It's something that Baker Mayfield, I don't think, could fully understand. When you go from the hunter to the hunted, and there's expectations of you to be good, not people waiting for you to fail. And Jamar Chase, the Cincinnati Bengals, fully is recognizing now that they're not the Cincinnati Bengals of the last 20 years, who couldn't get in the playoffs. And when they did, they couldn't get a win. They'd get close, but could never get over the hump. They had talented rosters, but people largely looked at them as a joke. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a franchise quarterback, weapons loading around him. You've got a defense that's going to be improved. You have a free agent destination for offensive linemen coming to protect Joe Burrow. You've drafted pretty well. And so now we'll throw this up. And you look at what Chase is saying. Now we just have the expectation that we're one of the best in the league, and we have to keep that expectation and roll with it. Every game is a tough game in the NFL. We're not worried about our X. Everybody has an X on their back, but saying, hey, we get it. We're good. Everyone knows it. We're not an easy win. We're not an easy off anymore. And so we got to go out there and play. Everybody gets those expectations. We're worried and taking care of ourselves. And it's great. And I know talk is cheap, especially at this point in time in the season. But if you're a Bengals fan, that should seem refreshing to you. You've got a guy, Joe Burrow, who you've seen kind of making the media rounds this last week and saying some things. But all of them are very measured in their talk. They're not predicting Super Bowl or bust. They're not saying that. They're talking about getting back to work. They're talking about expectations. They're talking about how can they become the best football team they can be? Because that's what it's ultimately all about. How good can you be as a football team? Lastly, I want to close with this. Dan Dickau, former Gonzaga guard from 20 years back, maybe even a little longer than that. Transferred in from, I believe, Washington, had success, had a NBA career, Nothing crazy of note, but was All-American at Gonzaga. Kind of one of the first guys to help get the ball rolling there in a big way. And he had some tweets. We're going to throw them up here in a minute, where he starts talking about the American model of basketball and really development, especially in basketball. And we'll throw this up. Said, I'm not sure this is going to go well with some people, but the U.S. model of basketball is broken in regards to youth skill development and the focus on rankings. Possibly three best players in the world, Giannis, the Joker, and Luka, could have cared less about rankings or even known where they were. USA Hoops will continue to win because they have outliers that overcome the negatives of the current system. Short rant, but the game needs more of a fundamental focus. So here's what he is saying when I look at this. And they had more tweets in there talking about it, but it's really about AAU one-on-one basketball versus overall skill development of the total player. Now, I understand Joel Embiid, he's fantastic. He's good. You've got young stars like Devin Booker, even though they got bounced by Dallas. Like there's Ja Morant, there's guys out there. But he starts talking about some of the guys who are even under recruited. And so they didn't maybe have all those star rankings beside them. And they didn't necessarily have the same style AAU circuit where it just glorifies one-on-one basketball and you don't necessarily have the holistic player development. That's one of the things that you see in American sports, especially basketball, is we want to play so many games, but then the games become so important individually that you don't necessarily develop a collective player who can play within a structure and people that are around him to make them better, where they make him better. And so that as I look at this and see like the AAU model, and then I watch guys like Joker and Giannis and Luka, who didn't come up like that, and watch kind of how they play and how they've been developed and their mentality and how they kind of look at the game. Like it's very refreshing. And so here's a guy in Dan Dickau who, really hasn't been on a national stage in probably, a decade or two, kind of taking a look and take an inventory of how we're creating these stars. Yeah, you got LeBron and Kevin Durant and a lot of guys who have been great, but are they outliers just because their physical ability has allowed them to achieve greatness? Or is it because like they just have tremendous skill? Yeah, they've developed that skill and they've been good, but they were, AAU phenoms and they just had overwhelming athletic ability and height and size. And not combined with athleticism, and not that these other guys didn't, but they've just been developed in a different way. And so you can see those elements beginning to benefit and pay off. And so that's my challenge, I guess, as we look at how American sports are developed at a youth level. Football is one of the few rarities simply due to its 11-man team game on each side. And so you've got to rely on everybody else. And the skill of development can be individual. And it's not like it's a free-flowing sport where understanding the space and everything around you and how it works. It's a little bit unique like that. And the specificity of positions and how you play. If you look at, whether it's soccer, boys or girls, I mean, basketball, AAU on both sides of this thing. I mean, it's just, you start to see kind of how this stuff is developed and the pull apart of the travel team, the rankings and all of these things. And how are we really developing and building these players? And are we building them holistically the way that they should probably be built? Just a question, something to think about, something to kind of lock in on the brain right there. But that's all for this edition of Carps Corner. Thanks for tuning back in. Gets me going, get me off the schneid, back here in the saddle, off of vacation time. I'd love to live on vacation. Maybe one day that'll happen for me. Not in the immediate future. I've got 4 young kids and they're very expensive mouths to feed. And I've got a job and a lot of things I love in life, but great to be back with all of you. And I look forward to talking with you soon.